Okay, everyone, it's 11 o'clock in this part of the country and state, so we might get started, appreciating everyone's time. So I've just posted in the Q&A there a welcome, and also wonderful Jacinta Perry, who I work with in this Thriving Kids in Disasters project, is online and is our technical Wonder Woman. So should you have any problems, please, there's her email, and she'll be able to help you, I'm quite sure. So without further ado, I'd like to say Gurumba Biggie and welcome. So I'd like to acknowledge and pay my deep respects to the First Nations custodians of these unceded lands that we're all meeting on and from today across Queensland and also Australia. And this includes where I'm coming to you from, which is Yuggurapul People's Country, here on the edge of the beautiful scenic rim, which is just outside of Ipswich, between Ipswich and Warwick, probably. So to elders past, present and emerging, thank you for your generosity, your spirit and teaching, and to our First Nations colleagues and partners here today. May we work together in unity to create a world that supports all people to flourish. And I'm just very considerate of the fact that we've got in Queensland at the moment a truth-telling and healing commission hearings. And so my heart is there with everyone, and I just do know that it's an important time. So a warm welcome and big thank you to everyone here online for being here and for prioritising our children and young people. So I just want to let you know that we are recording this session, and so with that recording the transcript will be made available afterwards, and I'll send you the details about that. Also, there's a Q&A here. Please pop your questions on there. Jacinta and I will monitor that as we go along. So as questions come up, pop them in, and we'll get going, I think. So why are we here? This is the first of 3 webinars that we're going to run that are focused on thriving kids in disasters. And thanks to our guest presenter practitioners and Canice Curtis from Wesley Mission Queensland Mental Health Services, and also hopefully his important ally and offsider Belle Harmon, who works with Canice in his work and is a young person herself. So Briony is here also from Leadrrr down in Victoria. She's you may well know her as a child-centred disaster risk reduction specialist. We're going to welcome to you both, to the 3 of you. I've introduced Jacinta. So let me just have a quick start, because I'm only going to speak a little bit about why this is important and why we've chosen to talk today about supporting kids' concerns, capabilities and actions around climate resilience and disaster risk reduction. You can see there that we're starting in the big picture. So this is the big picture context and what's facing kids and what kids are doing about that at the moment. To use a quote that Jacinta certainly has brought to my mind time and again, from UNICEF, climate change is changing childhood. That's a big part of why we need to give this our attention, and we need to take action and support the action that kids are already taking. So a range of factors come together to result in kids' disproportionate risks. That's what we know from the evidence when it comes to natural hazards, disasters and emergencies, because their body and brains and how they develop during the period of from perinatal up to late adolescence, 18 to 25 years, those development periods are peak and important, and developmental environments are really influential on what their outcomes are and how their well-being and their resilience into the future. And hazards, disasters and emergencies are obviously increasingly a critical concern. Risks, we need to recognise that risks are higher for kids that are already living with hardships. and including those that are in high risk, disaster prone or hazardous locations. We've seen that. As the most disaster prone state and territory here, we need to give kids our attention and work together with them and their caregivers to support their well-being and resilience across the interconnected phases and that's from prevention, preparedness, response and recovery. So that's really what Thriving Kids in Disasters has brought to people's attention, and it's gathering people together to take some action on this. Again, to talk to something that is said quite often in the project, we have a lot of existing knowledge. We just need to now garner that and pop it all together and put it into some concerted and coordinated action. We know that resilience is considered an important way to mitigate or offset impacts of hardships in kids' lives, and Thriving Queensland Kids Partnerships, who this project sits with, is that's their core business. And when they talk to resilience, especially in this project, we look at the whole that we look at when it comes to kids' resilience, we know that it's dynamic and that it changes over time. It's not something that's set in concrete, and we understand and look to individuals' resilience when we talk about their skills and abilities, but those skills and abilities sit in a broader context, and that context is family and kin, community, culture, country, spirituality and ancestors. So there's a broad lens and a holistic approach to what we're talking about when we talk about resilience. We also know from the science that by providing and wrapping around supports, tailored supports, and by reducing adversities, that helps kids with their resilience and promotes their well-being. So when it comes to, you'll see up here on the screen that we've worked with the NEST, which is a national framework for thinking about children and young people's well-being, and we've really structured how our thinking about children's well-being and resilience around these factors. And our guest presenters and today are giving you some examples and speaking to some of these different domains, they're called. So we talk about kids thriving when they're able to be healthy, when they have a strong sense of identity and connection to culture, when they feel and are valued, loved and safe, when they have material basics, and when they're learning and participating. So this is a great opportunity today, especially to focus on engaging kids and to highlight how we can work with them in the disaster management settings in a meaningful ways through learning and participating. Just a context again to recognise that John Villiers Trust funded this work, and it was important because more and more people were applying for project funding to build kids' resilience and work around disaster recovery, and they recognised that there wasn't really anything that told them what was a good investment. So phase 1 of our project earlier this year was focused on that exactly, bringing over 100 people together to establish that evidence base, and now we're rolling some of those recommendations out through briefings and presentations, a leadership alliance that many of you are involved in, that Jacinta is coordinating and hosting to develop some fundable propositions. We're also tying in with many of you where to do some engagements with children and young people across the state to feed into projects or opportunities. And also these webinars are an example of the work that I'm doing around practice-focused supports and resources for you all. So without further ado, I think Canice and Belle are going to speak first, and followed by some quick questions of them if they're specific, and then Briony. So over to you, Canice.
Thanks, Anita, and thanks for inviting me along. I hope you can hear me, and
we can.
I've just shared a slide which I hope you can see. I can see you nodding, Anita, so that's great.
Yep,
I trust that everyone can see that.
Yeah.
Great. So I'm Canice. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a senior practice lead for mental health services at Wesley Mission Queensland. Been Bill Harman-Schuft is also here. Bill is a young person and also been a research assistant on an internship with this project that we've been working on around climate change and mental health. Before I get into it, I want to acknowledge I'm on Quandamooka land today in the Redlands region just outside Brisbane. Pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging from all the lands that you're coming from today. And note that all the lands we're coming from haven't been ceded to any foreign or colonial power, and pledge to do whatever I can towards Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander social justice, human rights and equity. I also like to acknowledge lived and living experience of mental health challenges or emotional well-being challenges, and particularly in the context of this project, because you know, in fitting with the nest and that idea about how young people thrive when they have an opportunity to participate. This project is really about giving voice and helping young people and children participate following their lived and living experience of mental health challenges due to the climate crisis. So I'd just like to acknowledge the real importance of that perspective and how vital it is to the work we do. And it's really great to see it escalated alongside some of the other dominant discourses in mental health. I was hoping I could move to the next slide, but I'm having some trouble with that. Sorry, always a technical issue. Let me see if I can figure that out. Can we go to your slide deck? Anita, I'm terribly sorry. I can't seem to get onto the next slide. No, I'm sorry.
Certainly.
I'll stop sharing.
Thank you.
I can just ask when I need you to change slide. Hey, I've only got a couple. I'd much.
I'll go to the
second slide. Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
So what I'm going to cover today is just why we embarked on this particular project around responding to mental health challenges as a result of the climate crisis. I'll provide a bit of a context around the studies and research that's out there, and also our own little micro studies, and talk a bit about how we're centering the voices of children and young people. And I'll just talk a bit about the current status of the project. I guess my hope is that you've got, at the end, you'll feel like, oh yes, this is an important issue for young people, children and young people, and also, oh, there's a method here that I can go and learn more about around including those voices. I should just mention that emotional distress related to the climate crisis can be exclusive of the experience of disasters, but you know, the climate change and disasters intersect, and the data I can see from the UN suggests that 90% of disasters have a climate or environmental component to them. And I'm sure you're all aware, for those of us concerned with thriving kids and disasters, child born today, and this is UN UNICEF data, they'll experience 4 times more heat waves, 3 times more floods, and 1.5 times more wildfires than a child born in 1960. So there's a lot of increasing amount of data showing that this is really a significant thing that we need to be considering. Can we go to the next slide, Anita, please? Thank you. So the why, and I'm hoping to invite Belle in to talk a bit about the why from her perspective in just a moment, but I guess here's some of the data that gives grounds, if you like, for us to be looking at this. So Origin, which is Australia's, I guess they like to call themselves anyway, the preeminent think tank on young people. They found that, you know, they released a paper earlier this year, and they had 4 Australian studies and 4 international studies that really focused on, in a kind of a literature review that really focused on climate change and mental health. And I'm just going to mention some of these here as providing this why. Origin partnered with Mission Australia last year, and it was a survey of nearly 19,000 young people in Australia. 67% were concerned about climate change, 26% were very extremely concerned, and 51% identified climate or environment as the most important issue in their life. Kind of backing that up, Your Town found that in their study, one and two, want focused action to protect the environment. And the Australian Institute for Disaster Resilience in 2022 found that 78% of people, children and young people, were concerned about climate change in their study. Internationally, the largest study that I'm aware of was by Caroline Hickman and colleagues in 2021. 10,000 children and young people from around the world, including Australia, and found that 80% were worried about climate change. It was a mix of developed and developing countries, quote unquote, 80% in total were worried, 59% were very or extremely worried, and then really significantly, 45% reported that their feelings affected their day-to-day functioning. That was a figure that really grabbed me, because having worked in mental health for quite a while now, a lot of people experience anxiety, low mood, with all of those things. It doesn't necessarily impact their day-to-day functioning. 45% is a really significant figure in terms of something impacting someone's day-to-day functioning. In 2023, I guess, watching all of this come through from some of the kind of peak institutions in the child and young people's mental health space, we were curious whether we would get the same data on our local kind of level. So we run a number of child and youth mental health services in Queensland, and we were curious whether we'd kind of get in that 66%, like 2/3 to 4/5, 66% to 80% range. So we did, and again, I just want to be really clear that I wouldn't be drawing any big conclusions based on our study. This was kind of our starting point of seeing if there was something innovative that we should do here. But what we found initially was that 74% of the young people that we surveyed were concerned. So again, that's kind of consistent with the range from those bigger studies. One of the things that we did that we were curious about was whether staff also thought it was an issue. So mental health professionals of all stripes, so stripes, all disciplines, so it could be social work, psychiatry, nursing, OT, etc. Only 10% of them thought it was an issue for young people. And that was highlighted really significant gap. So 10% to 74%. That's really, we're clearly missing each other in some ways. It led me to think there's two pieces of work. So calling in adults and staff to understand this issue, how it impacts children and young people's mental health, and how can we respond to it in our various roles. And obviously then, how can we follow or develop best practice in terms of service delivery to children and young people. So I guess our question became, if you like, or our starting point became, how can a community mental health organisation respond to the emotional distress arising from the climate crisis? That's all the data, the numbers. I don't know if I speak for everyone, but I know some people feel like this is like when you get somebody actually speak, an actual lived experience person speaking, it's much more impactful. And that's Belle has been an amazing help in getting this project up and running and maintaining it. And I just thought rather than me, being old and quoting data at you, it'd be really good to hear from Belle directly. So I know we're doing kind of technical things in the background here. I'm hoping Belle can be unmuted and she can share why this is a particularly an important project from a young person's perspective.
Good morning, this is Belle speaking. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, good morning, Belle.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Well, I thought I'd just share a bit about my lived experience and why I've come onto the project. So my lived experience as a young person is that we are facing a climate crisis, and this is disturbing and has impacted my mental health and emotional well-being. And at some points, this has been every single day. So I remember when I first learnt of global warming, I felt terrified and trapped. I was probably aged about 10 years old. And I remember just thinking, like, this is really bad, like we're doomed. So in the weeks to come, I did experience feelings of sadness, hopelessness, despair, stress, worry, guilt, anxiety. And all these feelings resulted in difficulty sleeping and nights of little or no sleep. Now I know that what I was experiencing is being referred to as eco-anxiety, but at the time my parents and teachers did not know this, and my feelings and emotions weren't taken seriously, and I was kind of instructed to forget about it and move on. So over the years, this kind of became a pattern where I'd experience these feelings of eco-anxiety, and then the response would sort of be to, oh, just put it out of your mind and move on and just go about everyday life. But I guess the problem was that I continued to live through summers that were getting hotter and longer, and this made me feel distressed. I also lived through the 2011 and 2022 Brisbane floods, where I was aged 11 for the first one. And we now know that these floods were exacerbated by climate change. This was also a particularly emotionally distressing time, as I saw friends and families lose homes and their security. In one of the floods, I was actually evacuated from my unit by police officers. And so this was another time where my eco-anxiety flared up, but there weren't adequate supports in place. And then most recently, I guess in 2021, I was living in Jindabyne. And in this region, there are alpine forests that take about 20 years to mature and regenerate. So this meant that during the 2019 to 2020 bushfires that came through with climate-induced intensity and length that was unprecedented, the forest struggled to regenerate, which has been detrimental to the whole ecosystem. This was really saddening to see the struggle of all the plants and animals after the fires, and to see snow melting earlier in the seasons than it used to. So over the years, I guess myself, I've had to go on my own quest to alleviate the emotional distress that came about each time I'd have these bouts of eco-anxiety. And I did learn coping strategies and come up with my own practical ideas to combat the climate crisis and what's more ways I can. But I think this was an area in my childhood and adolescence that was overlooked by many adults surrounding me. And I know that a lot of my friends feel similar to me. I think a lot of young people feel this way, and this can be seen in the Greta Thunberg effect and seeing young people continue to participate in school strikes for climate change. And I think we definitely need to find ways to better support young people to deal with the emotional distress caused by the climate crisis, where we are seeing a loss in biodiversity, more unnatural disasters, and rising sea levels. That's all I've prepared for this morning. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Bill. I just moved to this slide because it's I guess I wanted to share how we're centering the voices of young people and children like Bill. I'll just start with some organizational context. So, and I guess this is some of the things maybe to be thinking about if you're seeking to address this in your own spaces. Before we started this project, we had success with another project using this methodology called human-centered design thinking or design thinking. There's many different forms of design thinking. The one I'm talking about is human-centered design thinking. We ran a project responding to the suicide and self-harm rates increasing among under 12s in collaboration with the Queensland Alliance for Mental Health and Gold Coast PHN. And that was a really strong success. So I guess that set the groundwork for us to be able to do Innovation 2.0 internally, if you like, and the topic being the climate crisis and mental health for young children and young people. So, you know, I guess there was some, how would I put it, strategic conversations around, you know, this has already been done, this has already been used, this can be adapted for Innovation 2.0. And so there was a level of organizational readiness, I think, to embrace doing this. And I guess everyone needs to assess their own organizational readiness. We had the success and we were able to kind of piggyback on that one to pivot into this project. So I am no expert on human-centered design thinking. I don't know if you can see the slide clearly. The resident expert is Stephen Hitchens. He's at RMIT in Melbourne, I believe. I think I've got that right. There's lots of institutions in Melbourne. I think it's RMIT. And I think it's a good methodology for our times, with that focus on participation of children and young people. And I guess, I mean, he says it best himself. He says the world is facing several critical global issues, including climate change, environmental degradation, inequality, poverty, political instability, and so on. These crises require collective action and solutions that prioritize sustainability, justice, and cooperation across borders. So it seems like a timely and useful methodology for our current, our current era. The thing I really like about it is that it is non-linear, and it involves constantly going back and checking in with, on this slide, they call it like engaging with your end user. It's not about what I think is best as, a mental health professional of, X number of years. It's not what, government or psychiatry or anyone else says might be best. It's about what do the service users think is best to address this issue. And it's about going back and continually checking in with them as you do the work. There is 5 phases. And as you can see with the arrows and the lines, that it's not necessarily linear, even though the page is like that. You may already be aware of this, but the 5 steps are engage, evaluate, explore, expand, and execute. I'm just kind of merge, because I know running short on time, so I'm just going to kind of merge the last 2 slides and just speak to it briefly. The engage part is where you do the initial kind of research. So we identified a problem, and then we needed to engage with our children and young people. So myself and Bill and the working group that have been established here, we've done literature reviews, surveys, we've researched current practices in addressing mental health and climate change, and we've run focus groups and interviews with children and young people from about 6 up to, depends what your definition of young person is, right? But we've done 6 to 25. I think you need to consider, how you scaffold those, because these conversations can create distress. You got to consider consent and ethics and all of those kind of things, and you also have to consider conflict, right? Because there's still people who deny this is an issue, and we did have some people who we interviewed and participated in our focus groups who were unaware, a very small minority, but there was people who were unaware or denied that this was a big issue for our children and young people. They were children and young people themselves, by the way. We did this again, like, we didn't try and reinvent the wheel. We engaged with the existing networks we had of young people advisory groups to some of our services, not to some, to all of our services that are for children and young people. We have advisory groups. So we used that as a way to tap into the community, rather than trying to build groups or accessing the community, because it's really hard to build new networks, but it's easier to engage those existing ones. When we collected all of that, various forms of data, the evaluation stage was really both the working group filtering, which includes young people and adults with lived and living experience and professionals of different stripes. When we evaluated, this is step 2, and this is just like trying to make sense of it, trying to look for themes, patterns, relationships. The things that came out for us were, started off with that: how can a community mental health organisation respond to the mental health issues as a result of the climate crisis? We came up with 2, they call them how might we statements, and the 2 were: how might we invite staff to consider the mental health impacts of the climate crisis, and how might we respond effectively? So outwardly, how do we prepare our staff, and how do we respond outwardly to the children and young people around those mental health challenges arising from the climate crisis? So they're the 2 kind of things we're tackling, and at the moment we're in that phase 3, the explore stage, where, again, I was just up in Harvey Bay consulting with our advisory group up there. So again, back to engagement around some of the ideas that we have, and asking them for ideas around how we might actually do that. So, for example, we're talking about, do we do a training package for staff where we have children and young people speak directly to the camera, around why this is important, how it impacts their emotional well-being, and how they'd like us to respond as professionals in this sector. We're wondering about website development. We're wondering about, TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, where we can put trustworthy information for young people, where we can give them practical tips, where we can link them to peers and groups active in advocacy in this space. So these are all things that we're tossing around and kind of brainstorming how that might actually look. And again, it's really important that for me, and I speak, I think, for everyone, but for me to consult, because I don't use social media that much, but I know that's where young people are. So that's what's really helpful to continue going back to engaging. So we haven't got to expand or execute yet, but I can speak briefly to what they might look like. So the expand is where you need extra expertise. So like if we ended up developing a training module, I would need people who are good at filming, editing, uploading the stuff online, all of those kind of things. I would need people who are good at marketing, good at communication, to develop websites. I'd need research people to help me find. I can find a lot of stuff myself, but I don't have time for, this is not the only thing I'm working on. So to find, a good set of practical tips, how to use TikTok and all, Instagram, all of that kind of stuff. That's where you're kind of working with those people to develop what it might look like. And then the execute phase, I don't like the word execute, but hey, that's where you're actually testing something and launching something. So we might go out to our advisory groups, our focus groups, and this is what we're thinking of. This is what a website might look like. This is what a social media tool might look like. This is what the learning for our staff looks like. What do you think? We test for a certain period of time, and then we will launch. And I guess one of the things that I've been working on in the background is making sure that and I guess it is a bit strategic, and sometimes it feels vaguely nauseating, but I have found it manageable when it's with purpose, and this is a very important issue, clearly. So we've been able to get, people in other parts of WMQ on board in those marketing IT areas and so on, so that we can actually make this happen. Because I'm sure, like us all here, I do not want to be one of those people who promise something and don't deliver to children and young people, because I think they've probably had enough of that. Anita, I've kind of, because I was conscious of giving the other presenter as much time as possible, I've kind of mishmashed this slide and the last one. So you feel free to jump through to the final slide I had.
Okay.
That's pretty much what I had for today. I'm hoping that was useful. Any feedback, critique is most welcome. And I guess I'm hoping you've gained some insight into why this is important, both from a data perspective and the voice of lived experience. And here is a methodology to help you encourage the participation of children and young people. Obviously, in the time I have, I can't go too much into it, but this is a really good way of getting participation on the issues that are important to children and young people. I'm going to stop now because I think I'm out of time.
Thanks, Canice, and thank you very much, Belle. I don't have any specific questions yet from people, but do send them in if you can think of some as things go along. I did get a big thank you to Belle from someone who really appreciated your vivid voice in that presentation, and someone else loves that design slide and the process. So obviously it's resonating with people already. And I think it was great, Canice, that you spoke to that design methodology in how you did it and applied it to your process so far. So thank you for that. And I think then, if we haven't got any particular specific questions, oh, here we go. Dan would be curious for Canice to offer insights around additional disaster management responses rather than macro climate change interventions. So maybe Canice, you might like a bit of time to think to that one. So unless something's off the top of your head, we can come back to it at the end. Oh, you're just on. I just need you to unmute your.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
fine. We can come back at the end if we have time. That's fine.
Okay, great. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. And thank you both very much. So we might move on there to Briony. And Briony, would you, I think I remember that you would like me to drive.
Yes, please drive.
Just give me the nod.
Thank
Welcome,
you.
Briony. And
Thanks,
I'll let you
Anita.
introduce, if people don't know you already, which I'll be surprised if they don't, I'll hand to you.
Thank you. And thank you, Canice and Belle. That was a really great presentation and a lot. I'm just going to be referring back to your presentation for the rest of my presentation. So much of what you're saying and your methodologies align. Well, Anita said that our presentations were going to flow really nicely. And now I know why she said that, because I think there's a lot of synergies in the way that we work and the concerns that we share. So yes, I'm Briony Towers and I am the founder and co-director of Leadrrr, which stands for Learning Ecologies for Action on Disaster Risk Reduction and Resilience. And it's a bit of a mouthful, but I think it kind of sums up what we're working for pretty aptly. So I'm going to today share some of my experiences of putting words into practice in this area of children as agents of change in disaster risk reduction and resilience. I'm doing this from the beautiful lands of the Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, who I recognise as the sovereign owners of this land, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. And I also pay my respects to First Nations children and young people all over the world who are fighting to protect our lands, waters, and sky. So to start off with, when we talk about words into practice, Anita, if you can go to the next slide, I want to be really clear about the words that are in the policy documents and the strategies from the international down to the state level, starting with the Sendai framework, which recognises that governments need to be engaging with children and youth in the design and implementation of policies, plans and strategies, and that children are actually agents of change who should be given the space and modalities to contribute to disaster risk reduction in accordance with legislation, national practice and educational curricula. At the national level, we have the second National Action Plan to implement the National Disaster Risk Reduction Framework. And under Priority 1 for understanding risk, it actually explicitly recognises the importance of including disaster risk reduction within school curricula and supporting school-based risk mitigation plans. And under Priority 2, Accountable Decisions, it recognises the importance of equipping the next generation of Australians to act and become future community leaders. Thanks, Anita. And this is a nice one because I think it really brings the Australian Fire and Emergency Services up to speed with the international research and policy. So under Strategic Direction 1, the AFAC Strategic Directions for 2022 to 2026 talk about supporting disaster resilience education and collaborative approaches to engagement with children and young people in schools and other settings with a focus on place-based learning, student agency and local action. And I don't know if she's still on the call, but Liz Addison from Department of Fire and Emergency Services in Western Australia is someone that we have worked with for a very, very long time. And I know that she would have been as happy as me to see those words appear in those strategic directions after what has been a pretty long fight. I also wanted to highlight that the recently released National Child and Youth Statement on Climate Change which has emerged from the Australian Local Conference of Youth 2024, leading into the upcoming Conference of Parties for climate change, actually demands that the Australian government prioritises disaster preparedness and risk reduction as critical adaptation measures and supports community-led and child-centred disaster preparedness and recovery, and that governments also ensure that young people have access to quality disaster resilience education that includes and values First Nations knowledge of country. So this has actually come from young people who were involved in crafting that statement. And again, it's just kind of putting the emphasis on that disaster risk reduction piece as part of climate change adaptation. And then for the Queenslanders on the call, we also have some explicit reference to young people in the Queensland Strategy for Disaster Resilience, and that talks about engaging with young people to ensure that information is delivered through channels that young people access information from. So I think that's still kind of talking about, communicating to young people. And I think all of us could be looking at how might we influence future Queensland strategies to actually position young people as agents of change in this process, that they can actually be driving the information or the development of information and dissemination of information themselves. Thanks, Anita. So I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey through my research and practice in child-centred disaster risk reduction and school-based education for disaster risk reduction. And for me, the Strathewen-Arthurs Creek Bushfire Education Partnership was really important in shaping how I understand and work in this space. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the little township of Strathewen, which is about 55 minutes drive northwest and from where I am in the inner north of Melbourne, Strathewen was pretty much completely destroyed in the 2009 Black Saturday bushfires. So in a town of 200 residents, there were 27 fatalities. Nearly every house was destroyed. The school was destroyed. The local fire brigade was destroyed. And obviously the grief and trauma and loss in that community in the aftermath of that event was profound. So Jane Haywood, the principal of Strathewen Primary School, and Liesl O'Brien, a member of the Arthurs Creek Fire Brigade, about 6 years after that bushfire disaster, got together and started talking about what they might do for the new cohort of students that were coming into Strathewen Primary School, which had since been rebuilt, but had a lot of anxiety around bushfires. Obviously had been growing up in the context of disaster recovery and had been, were being exposed to stories and images and the emotions of that disaster. So they thought, what can we do to actually give these, to actually build, some resilience in our school community around the bushfire risk. So they engaged the students in these beautiful, creative, arts-based projects where the students were developing books and claymation films, community workshops and presentations to communicate fire risk to the community. And I evaluated that program in 2017. It had been running for a year, and I was just really struck by how it was really bringing the community together to have these really meaningful conversations around bushfire risk reduction in ways that the students were really leading on. They were really, the students were really being given a lot of power in decision making to actually develop these bushfire risk communication materials that were being presented to the wider community of Strathewen. So I evaluated the program, found that knowledge of bushfire amongst the children was really quite high. The children were communicating with their families around bushfire risk and preparedness. The adults that come in from the local fire brigade to support the school to implement the program, we're seeing that it was actually a really effective community engagement strategy, that they were actually able to reach members of the community that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to reach. And it was just building these collaborative partnerships and relationships within the community that were really kind of inoculating the children against worries and fears that they might have had around bushfire. Now, the quotes that you see on the screen there are not from my evaluation. They are from a student-led evaluation that the students carried out after maybe 18 months after I'd done my evaluation. So the school wanted to carry on monitoring and evaluating the outcomes and impacts of their program. They had no budget for evaluation, and I suggested that if they wanted to let the students do their own student-led evaluation, I'd be happy to provide technical support. So we put that to the students, who thought that was a great idea. And they went off and designed surveys for every cohort that's involved in their program, from the students to the parents to the members of the fire brigade who come in and help them and support their learning, to the teachers. And so they put together all these questions to start assessing outcomes and impacts. And all these surveys started coming back, and I was like, guys, you got so many responses to your survey. It's probably 150% response rate. Why have I got all these parent surveys? And like, well, I actually got my granddad to do it. I got my aunt to do it. I got my neighbor to do it. And everybody wanted to be putting in their 2 cents worth into this evaluation. And they had this really good data. So with that data, I thought that it was really important to be sharing that with people. So I suggested maybe they should submit an abstract to the Australian Disaster Resilience Conference, which was accepted. And then the next thing we know, we're actually going to help the kids present their evaluation results to about 400 people at a national conference. So what I learned from all of that time that I spent in Strathewen was that when the children lead, it has really positive outcomes for the children, for the school community, and it actually really builds a culture of disaster risk reduction in the community. This partnership is still going. They're adapting, they're changing all the time, they're always doing things. You can check out what they do on their Facebook page, which is just Strathewen Arthurs Creek Bushfire Education Partnership. But what became through really, really strongly for me in that work was the importance of learner agency. And so the definition of learner agency that I really like is from the OECD, and it's that learner agency refers to the level of autonomy and power that a student experiences in their learning environment. It acknowledges that students have the ability and the will to set goals, reflect, and act responsibly to exert a positive influence on their own lives and the world around them. It involves student agency involves taking action rather than being acted upon, shaping rather than being shaped, and making responsible decisions and choices rather than accepting those determined by others. And this is what I saw at Strathewen Primary School as I evaluated the program, as I supported the students to evaluate the program. That learner agency was just coming through as really, really important. So I took that idea. Thanks, Anita. Next slide. I took that that concept of learner agency and initiated an action research project at Harkaway Primary School, which is on the southeastern peri-urban fringe of Melbourne. And over a period of about 2 years, worked with the students and the teachers and the school leadership on project-based learning activities where the students were identifying problems related to bushfire risk in their school community, and then working on projects to develop solutions to those problems. And what came out of that process was the Harkaway Bushfire Safety Manifesto. And this document, which is now a curriculum document that the school actually uses to inform how they do bushfire education in their school, was developed in a workshop with the students who had been involved in this action research process over that period of the 2 years. And the manifesto has 4 points. The children said they want to learn about bushfire safety, and that means they actually feel safer when they are learning about bushfire, and they actually want the knowledge and skills that they need to be safe in a high bushfire risk environment. They want to make decisions about their own learning and action. So they are experts in their own lives and they are experts in their own learning. And when they have the opportunity to exercise power in decision making about what they learn and how they learn it, they are a lot more committed to that learning process and a lot more committed to actually solving real problems in their community that matter to them. They also want access to trustworthy information from experts. So through that period of those project-based learning activities, we would draw on our own local networks and professional networks to make sure that the students had access to expertise around bushfire risk management. Whatever project it was that they were working on, we would do the best that we could to give them the opportunity to share their ideas and have conversations and ask questions of people who actually have expertise in that particular area, whether it's a local fire brigade member, whether it's a bushfire scientist, whether it's a fire ecologist, whoever that might be. And then the last thing that the students want is that they told us they want to teach others. So having learned all of those things about, having learned really important things about bushfire risk management in their communities, they want platforms to share that learning with others. It's not just going home and talking to their parents. It's having opportunities to teach younger students in their schools. It's having opportunities to teach students in other schools. So the kind of kids teaching kids model was something that they were really passionate about pursuing. So thanks, Anita. So off the back of that work at Strathewen and at Harkaway, both really intensive research projects where I spent a lot of time in the school collecting a lot of data, talking to a lot of people, we were able to develop 5 good practice principles. So the first one is transdisciplinary curriculum design. So recognising that bushfire is a socio-environmental phenomenon and that we can actually be incorporating bushfire into the whole range of learning areas in the curriculum, from the humanities to science to mathematics even, and then also the general capabilities. So, personal capability, critical thinking, problem solving, all of those things. We can be bringing all of that together to create really rich learning experiences for the students. Place-based pedagogy is really, really important. Bushfire risk and all disaster risk is constructed in place. So we really want the students engaging with their own local, their own social and natural environment. And so we try to make sure that, that their learning experiences are really grounded in the places that they live their everyday lives. Action-oriented learning goals. This is a huge one in terms of thinking about children's well-being and any kind of bushfire-related fears or anxieties they might have. When they are actually focused on solving problems and taking action in meaningful ways in their communities, we see huge benefits in terms of their sense of safety and security. in relation to bushfire. That student voice and agency piece there is there obviously really important that the students have power in decision making around what they learn and how they learn it, and that they have the opportunity to shape their world. And then collaboration and partnership. And this goes to what Canice was speaking about really clearly earlier, is that we can't, this is a whole community, whole society issue, that we need so many different kinds of expertise. We need so many different, we need resources. We can't do this alone. We have to have these cross-sector or multi-sector collaborations and partnerships to actually make all of this work in practice. Thanks, Anita. So we were then really lucky to be able to get a bit of seed funding to develop a program that embodies those 5 good practice principles. And it's called Schools in Fire Country. And Anita, can we go to the next slide? Don't play it yet, but so this Schools in Fire Country program was developed through a collaboration with the Country Fire Authority in Victoria, the Department of Environment, Energy and Climate Change, Natural Hazards Research Australia, who had funded my research in this area when they were the Bushfire Natural Hazards CRC before their current incarnation, and my organisation Leadrrr. And we worked really hard for about 2 years in a very collaborative, human-centered design process to develop this program. And I'm going to get Anita to play this video, which shows you what this program is all about. Thanks, Anita. And we'll just go to the last slide there. Oh, there's all our collaborators on that last one. So 5 years ago, a lot of people told me that it wasn't going to be possible to ever have a program like this implemented at scale. I've got to pay tribute to my my colleague at the Country Fire Authority, Neil Munro, who was in that video, who has just done he's done the impossible as far as I'm concerned. He's actually gotten this program into Victoria's Bushfire Management Strategy Action 1E. That's us. And yeah, we're so proud of what we've been able to achieve. It's not, it's not over. There's restructuring going on in government departments that are involved in this program at the moment, which is going to affect us. But yeah, we're really happy with where we've been able to take things to. And I don't know, I kind of just hope that this might serve as a little bit of inspiration for people who are kind of starting the journey or halfway through the journey and potentially feeling, a little bit discouraged at times. It is really hard. It is really hard work. Children and young people are the most marginalised group in disaster risk management because they don't have a voice unless we create the opportunities for them to have that voice. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Briony. Amazing as ever. And there are a lot of comments about how amazing that you can probably see in the chat, how amazing the program is and how it aligns with the curriculum while making it relevant and promoting and enabling kids' capabilities and their agency. So a lot of people are interested in getting a link to that presentation, which is in the slide itself. And that's publicly available, or is that in your own library, Bri?
So that QR code, hopefully that works, but we actually have a video for each of the 3 phases. What you saw was the introduction video. We have a video for each of the 3 phases of the
Great.
program. If you want to get in touch with Neil, who is the implementation genius behind this, shoot me an email and I'm very happy to put you in touch. He's very generous with his knowledge and his experience. He came into this 5-year, when we started this project in 2020, he'd never done anything in schools. He'd never worked with children. He didn't know anything about education or child-centered DRR. And and he's one of us now. So he's very happy to share his knowledge and experience. The Bushfire Safety Manifesto QR code there is a video we actually made during the pandemic in a lockdown. We actually made a video of the manifesto with the kids. And yes, what is their FB page? So down the bottom, if you just put Strathewen Arthurs Creek Bushfire Education Partnership into FB, it will come up, and that's basically the archive of all of the amazing stuff that they've produced over the years. Yes, and there's a comment, love a student-led evaluation. That was just the best thing I've ever done. That really taught me that stay radical, let the children lead, and you always get a good outcome.
Yes, and it certainly speaks to the power of getting everyone together and collaborating with kids at the centre. As predicted, someone has, I predicted this question too, Ori. Has this approach been used and applied to other disaster management situations? So floods, cyclones, like we talked about.
Yeah, so no, it hasn't, not yet. But I think I think what does generalize, I think, are our kind of basic principles of collaboration and partnership, student voice and agency, transdisciplinary learning, all of that stuff. But then most importantly, the process of development, which is that, what Canice is using as well, that human-centered design or that relational design, and that collaboration. And I think that's what definitely translates. The learning, the pedagogical model that we have as well with Discover, Investigate and Take Action probably applies as well. That's just good. I mean, that's just good project-based learning. We have some practice briefs that we're just about to publish, which actually go into quite a lot of detail around the process of development, because I said to Neil, we've got to document this, we've got to record it, because otherwise, you know, we really want people to be able to learn from our experience. And that's one, yeah. And I say to Canice and Belle as well, like, don't underestimate the importance of documenting your process over product every time.
So, Briony, someone's asked, has the program been delivered after a disaster, and how are the children's mental health as they discussed fires and all that happened?
Yeah, good question. One reason I love this project so much is because this project is being scaled up into other schools now, and I haven't even set foot on site. People always said, oh, but it's, you know, people, I think there's a tendency for people to sometimes say, oh, but that program's because of Briony, or that program's because of Lisa, or that program's because of Neil. Well, I haven't set foot on, I haven't set foot in a school in East Gippsland that was impacted really heavily in the 2019-2020 bushfire season. They're implementing the program. I get these beautiful dispatches from the community-based bushfire management facilitator for Department of Energy and Environment, Climate Change out that way, of the kids out on country learning with their traditional owners, working with their local fire ecologists. They're implementing the program. It's having a really positive effect on the kids' sense of safety and security. We need funding to actually be able to keep researching these impacts and outcomes and processes. But yeah, so it's kind of a full circle, starting in Strathewen in a fire affected community, going away for 7 years, working on developing something that can actually now be delivered in another school, and it's place-based. They take our model, they take our the resources that we've developed, and they adapt it all for their own local context. So it's a really meaningful experience for the kids. So yeah, it's being implemented in a fire affected community, which is really interesting to see.
So Canice, I see you also mentioned there you're partnering with University of Sunshine Coast.
Yeah, just to pick up on the point there about documenting your process, I agree. And one of the things was, like, I don't want it to be just this thing that we did and no one knows about it, and so how can we share it? So we're partnering with the University of Sunshine Coast to they're on our working group, and they're assisting with documenting the process and then turning it into what might be an academic journal article, or and other ways that we can communicate what we've done, in the hope that people can pick it up and run with it in their own setting then.
There's just a question here about thoughts on disaster from crime, like arson rather than natural disaster. A school in our footprint had a period of time where it seemed like each school holiday period another building was torched by different people. So any comments on that, either of you?
Oh, look, it's a bit out. It's a bit outside my wheelhouse, but I guess the only thing that I would say is that often when kids are playing with, sometimes when kids are playing with fire and it actually results in a bushfire, it's because they don't necessarily understand that when the humidity is at 0, it's 45 degrees and you've got 60 kilometre-hour winds, it's not a good idea to be playing with matches in the paddock. So one of the things that we really focus on teaching the children is how to read their environment, and how to understand where there are those increased periods of risk. So that's really the only thing I can speak to about that. But I would also say that the relationships that young people can actually establish through these kinds of programs with their local emergency services, and have some really good positive pro-social experiences, can actually potentially make a difference as well.
What just comes up for me, and again, it's outside my wheelhouse as well, so I'd be very cautious of commenting on that, but I'm thinking about thinking back to the nest, and what aspects of that are not working for those people that you know, might be at a point where they feel like that's a good idea, as well as the things that Briony's saying, you know, like I'm just curious about, yeah, like what's happened to get us to that point where people are playing with fire and what have you. Yeah. Don't know if that's helpful, but that's just the mental health trauma-informed, trauma-integrated perspective coming up. Yeah.
And that certainly would relate to, we've got a kind of flow-on question about, in reference to that, especially in remote locations, where there's cultural connections. Was this included? So I think, Briony, you spoke before about working with elders to build on cultural knowledge and transfer cultural knowledge and connections built that way through reading environment, knowing the environment, knowing the stories, etc. Do you want to speak to that?
We're just we're working really Neil at Safer Together, who's leading the implementation of the program, was working very carefully to build relationships with the traditional owner groups around the state. And because we have a module on, you know, we did work with a with an Aboriginal educator who helped us to develop a module for Aboriginal cultural burning, but we really just developed that as a placeholder. We wanted that to be front and center. So in the learning model, the students start with they start off with fire ecology, so this idea that fire is a natural part of the environment and the environment actually needs fire to survive and thrive. And then the next thing they learn is about Aboriginal cultural burning. So it's actually not starting with the idea of bushfire hazard or disaster. It's starting with fire as part of the, you know, the fabric of you know, life on this continent. And so that's something that we're that we're just working as the program is implemented in schools around the state. We're just working toward the schools are working towards making those connections with their with their local local traditional owners. And you know, in my I guess my dream would be that they just work that out between themselves. You know, we've just said that this is where it can sit in the teaching and learning plan. It comes right up front. It's a priority. It's a kind of foundational piece, and then they just do it in a way that's meaningful and culturally appropriate and fun for the kids.
And I do know that Fire to Flourish is a program that many of you may have heard about. So it's a lovely program that is kind of being incubated or hosted through the Monash Sustainable Development Institute. And that program's really working with a range of local communities on community-led community disaster resilience, and including through recovery from the bushfires from 2019-20. And there's certainly a lot of involvement of kids engaging with elders in the community and building those connections, being out on country, learning about country, especially where it's not a remote community, where there's not immediate access to the elders, or that's part of daily life. And people are finding that that's really has a big impact. So if you look up some of their funded projects, you'll see some of their terrific work. And they also apply participatory granting, which means that the community gets to vote on the projects that get funded. So, all right, just a couple before we close. Brian, someone's asked, Dr. Briony, what is next for you as an action researcher? And for Canice, what is the exact call for action for us as researchers and practitioners in terms of helping young people with their mental health?
You go first, Canice.
Oh, thanks. Two things. We need to equip people, our teams and our staff that are working with children and young people every day, to understand that they are growing up in a different world to the one that I grew up in, and many of us here. and that impacts their mental well-being. And two, we need to in many ways throw out the old ways of doing things in mental health and listen to what they need.
Thank you. Briony?
Yeah, I let Canice go first because I knew it was going to be, kind of reflective of my thoughts as well. But I think I think for researchers and practitioners working in this space, I would just say, for God's sakes, look after each other. This is really tough. This is tough terrain, like there's a big emotional burden. There's a big, it's very intellectually challenging. It's logistically a nightmare. But yeah, I would say just really look after each other. I know it's a competitive world out there. I know that, resources are scarce, and, that everyone's kind of wanting to do good work. But I would say, really, really, if you make that the number one priority, and let the young people lead. This is their work. We're just there to facilitate. We're just there to support and facilitate it.
Thank you. Thank you both. I see we're a bit over 1 minute over time, which is not too bad considering what a bad timekeeper everyone knows I am. So, I just want to thank you all very much. Canice, Belle, Briony in particular, thank you for sharing your amazing knowledge, experiences, insights, ideas. I think you have really inspired a lot of people today. We will be following up some of the questions we might not have gone to, but we will get back to you and follow up with information and resources following this webinar, flagging with you all that there'll be 2 webinars to come, so please attend them. This is our way of resourcing you and promoting this focus on infants, children and young people. The second webinar is going to be at the end of October, so look out for that, and details will follow shortly. In that email, I may well, instead of running a little poll now, I'll let you all go back into your lives, and I will just attach a little survey or a feedback so that we can make sure we're on track and